Okay, it's
Wait,
going
so
now.
stop recording.
Broadcast is live. I got the official sign in the middle. I just wanted to welcome everyone to Blurb's Creative Pursuit Town Hall. My name is Dan Milner. I'm Blurb's creative evangelist. And before we get started, I want to thank several groups of people. The first of which is the panelists that we have here today. We've got Stuart and Kenneth and Maya and Jess. We are without Gabriella and Gotti Jones. She had a last-minute scheduling conflict, so she's not going to be with us today. But we still have 4 superheroes on this panel. Not putting myself in that category, but you 4 definitely superheroes. So thank you so much for taking time to do this. We really appreciate it. The second group I want to thank is the attendees. I've heard how many people we have signed up for this thing, and it's pretty encouraging and staggering too. Quite a few people signed up for this, which is great because living in the digital age as we do now, it's pretty great to see so many people interested in a panel, a town hall that's really about print and creativity. And the last group that I want to thank is the Blurb marketing team, who was able to pull this together in a very short amount of time. And if you've been on Twitter or you've been on any of the other networks and seen the promotions that have gone out, they look really beautiful. And also to collect and work with all 4 of you in such a short time was also great. So thanks to the Blurb team, thanks to you all, and thanks to everyone who is attending this crazy little talk that we're doing right here. So as we get started, the first thing I'd like to do is for one at a time, and Jess, we can start with you. I would love for you to basically tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do, and then also if you could mention someone who has influenced you as a creative.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Miller. I'm a designer and illustrator based in Los Angeles. I specialize in surface pattern design, character portraits, and hand lettering. I run my own illustration business, Jess Miller Draws. My illustration style is very whimsical, colorful, filled with funny puns and positive messaging. I sell my art on greeting cards, home goods, tech accessories, book covers, you name it. And I've had the pleasure of working with clients including LA Times, Penguin Random House, the Ellen Shop, just to name a few. And I am definitely influenced by designer and illustrator Tad Carpenter. I just love his bright and cheerful designs and the hand-drawn approach that he brings to his work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Kenneth, how about yourself?
Hello, I'm Kenneth Fitzgerald, and I'm a professor of design here at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. And in my creative career, well, I studied art, and so I still have an art career of making objects. In design, I'm primarily known as a critical writer, and I wrote for many years for Emigre magazine, and I have a couple of books of my collected works out there, and I'm still writing. Hopefully something new will be coming out in the next few weeks. And as a designer, probably as someone who's teaching design, I mean, since I also write and as an artist, it's tough to narrow down to one person. So since I'm a professor of design, I'll name my most inspiring designer, which is the late Barney Bubbles, who designed many new wave punk album covers back in the 70s, my formative years.
All right. You can't go wrong with punk, for certainly. Love the background. And also, I just want to point out that if I'm not mistaken, Kenneth, you are using Tumblr as well to show off some of your work. So,
yes.
So my heart goes out. I love Tumblr. I loved it in the heyday of Tumblr. So when I saw that, I was thrilled to see that you're still using that.
Well, thank you. It does what I need it to.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a great program. So I was, it just gave me a little moment of happiness when I saw that. Stuart, how about you?
Hey, everyone. So I'm Stuart Paley. I'm a photographer based here in Southern California between Joshua Tree and Orange County. And for the last decade or so, I photographed wildfires in the state as an acute effect of climate change and how and why humans relate to the environment, how we utilize it, and sometimes how we fail at it. And someone who's influenced me artistically speaking actually is Vincent van Gogh. You know, his painting Starry Night, Paris Cafe, obviously very well-known works, but his use of color to sort of illuminate the night and how you can sort of use natural and artificial light as a palette was very influential for me in the long exposure work of wildfires.
Interesting. A photographer referencing a painter. I like that. I like a little cross-platform here. So Maya, Yeah, how about a little, basically tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do, and someone who influenced you.
Right. So I'm a collage artist. I make collages like these out of vintage images that I find in vintage magazines and books. I have been collecting this over 7 years, so I have a massive collection. And yeah, I have been full-time artist for 7 years. And I mainly sell loads of prints and I sell originals. And I have exhibited quite a lot in Europe. And mainly London, where I live. And I focus a lot on social media. So I share a lot on my Instagram, on my TikTok. I show my processes and stuff. And yes, exhibit a lot as well. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Before the show started, thank you, Maya. But before we started, I was joking that someone had written me on my YouTube channel and said, Milner, you've lost it. We're in the digital age. Print is dead, and said referencing to the fact that depending on where you are, like sort of level wise in the creative world, print, it could seem like print is not what it once was, but at the higher level, it's still interesting. This is just a quick question for everyone. It's interesting in some ways, ironic in some ways too, but how many of you use Instagram to promote your work? What a shock. I'm not shocked. So is it interesting to promote print pieces through Instagram? And the reason I ask is I just did an interview with someone and I was filming him and he said, I don't post photographs on Instagram. I post photos of prints that I've made on Instagram. And he found that very ironic. And so just off the top of my head, it's interesting to me that using a digital platform to promote print it's been that way for quite some time, correct? And anyone can answer.
Yes, I mean, I make videos of my prints generally to show the quality of the prints. And I think I couldn't make a living as an artist today without selling prints generally, because I think prints make it a lot more affordable for people to purchase rather than buying original artworks. And yes, so prints are really important, I think.
Anyone else? Kenneth?
It's a blessing, I think. I'm still trying to sell my most recent book, which was published by a Dutch publisher, and it's available here in the US, but you're not going to find it in bookstores. And so it certainly makes me much more active since there is what's available on Instagram as far as coming up with ideas of how to use Instagram. And also I'm the one who's got to get the word out about this book. So maybe I've not been as creative as I can be, but I like to think it makes me think more often about, well, what else can I do with this book as an object and make it interesting for people out there.
Would you say, and this is again for everyone, would you say that the core principle of your practice is print and the other means of communicating and also marketing are surrounding print as the final sort of the core piece? And Stuart,
Yes.
for you in particular, because working as a photographer and you work for Nat Geo and Washington Post, these are print things, but you're also putting your work out into the ether and the digital space. But you've also done 2 books. And so when you walk into the field as a photographer, is your primary long-term goal with that work to be in book or print form?
That's a great question. I think in the long term is to have something physical and in print. Obviously, there's the immediacy of the news element of photographing for digital dissemination on social media, for websites. There's the news element of public education or information. Being press out there covering kind of the blow by blow. But in the larger scheme of the work that I'm doing, this is documenting climate change in the American West and having a body of work. My first photography book was 5 years ago now, and having that, it's not like a trade book that Blurb does, but it's like a 8x10 medium-sized coffee table book. If you're out and about, you can hand it to somebody and show the work in a tangible way that just works a lot better than pointing a phone at somebody when it's 100 degrees out and the screen shuts off due to overheating. And obviously, like this in the background, there's just something tangible. And I know we could talk about just this one subject for an hour easily. There's just something about having physical print that's beautiful, in simple and elegant and like Maya was saying, accessible to people. Because if someone wants to hire me for a day or a shoot, that adds up quickly versus, if I have an edition to print or an open edition smaller print, that makes it accessible for somebody to be part of the work and support the ongoing work. And I think that's important, is that, my peers, I'm 34. So it's not like a lot of the peers who are interested in my work are necessarily institutional collectors. There are millennials that are also trying to make it in the world and on a budget. So it's a nice way to get the work out there. So long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's good. Well said. Jess, one of the things I found interesting doing a little background on you was that you started your career in toy packaging and then somehow transitioned to illustration, how does that work and why did you do that?
Yeah, I graduated from Boston University with a BFA in graphic design in 2008. So to date me, but that was the height of the recession. And it was also a weird time because like the iPhone just came out in like 2007. So like, UX design was like pretty new. And what I learned in college was print design. And so I really kind of leaned into package design. And in 2008, it was hard to find any kind of work, but I was lucky enough to land an internship working with Disney Consumer Products. And that really launched a 15-year career in toy package design. And I did a lot of art direction and pixel pushing for numerous toy companies until the pandemic hit in 2020. And I was laid off indefinitely. So I really took that time to just explore digital illustration. And I took as many online courses as I could just to pass the time. And I started my Instagram account, Jess Miller Draws, just for fun to share my class projects. And it really blew up. I have amassed nearly 100K followers in under just 3 years. And I find most of my client work through Instagram. And so what started out just for fun has turned into a full-fledged illustration business. And my experience in toy packaging has definitely influenced my illustration style, but I can't even imagine going back to that corporate lifestyle ever again.
What do you mean? I heard the corporate lifestyle is the dream. So follow-up question to that, which is, had COVID not hit and you were sort of, let's say comfortable in the corporate world doing your thing, if COVID hadn't hit, do you think you would have still made the same decision and made a jump and go into illustration?
No, I think at that time, my dream was having a corporate job. It was funny. I was like kind of a serial contract designer. Like no one would hire me full time. And so I think like when the pandemic hit, it was kind of the universe telling me like a hard stop and a hard quit. And it was like, you kind of need to do this on your own. You have an entrepreneurial spirit. You just need to start creating art and put yourself out there. And so kind of like the pandemic was a blessing in disguise for me. I know there's a lot of horrible things came out of the pandemic, but for me, it was actually, it was a great thing.
And I think something you said, hopefully will resonate with the audience as well, which you said something that started out as a fun project became this thing. And I think a lot of times left to our own devices, we have to at some point ask the question to ourselves, what is it we actually want to do? If money was no object or there's no strings attached to it, what is it that you actually want to do? And you seem to have come to that. It was a COVID assist, but once you were there, you realized, okay, this is my new thing.
Right.
Maya, a question is, you're a collage artist, you're creating things by hand. Creating things by hand is sort of the model of the modern maker movement. And in some ways, it kind of feels like making things by hand is a reflex or response to the living in the digital age where so much of what we do is digitized. And all of a sudden you've got millennials who are now axe makers. You've got millennials who are growing coffee in the mountain somewhere. People are really trying to get back to doing things by hand. Was that part of the process for you? We're all connected digitally, but what was it about making things by hand that was so important?
To be honest, I have always loved making things by hand. So it was always something I have done, but I definitely love it more as I have become more digital because it gives me that break from the computer, it gives me the break from the internet. I can just sit on my desk and just zone out. It's very therapeutic making art, and especially like cutting images out and stuff. So I just find that it's needed in my life, and I think that's what a lot of people need, and that's why a lot of people tend to want to try to go back to making things by hand and create things. And a lot of people actually who follow me are interested in making handmade collages, which is why they start following me, because they want to see how I actually make them, because I actually record my process on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. So for me, it's always been an important part of my life because it gives me that break from the stuff. But I think generally, as more digital we become, I think it's becoming more and more important to other people to just switch off.
And is there any way for you to sort of classify the average time that it would take you to craft a piece?
You know what, it depends. Like my mixed media paintings, they take me like a few weeks to finish. My collages, sticking them together, like maybe it can take me a few minutes, but finding the images that actually fit together and perspectively are right for each other can take me anywhere from days to weeks to months. So it just really depends. I was actually wondering this myself, because a lot of people post videos of this painting took me 50 hours. And I'm like, how do you actually know that? Because with my art, it's sort of a lot different. I don't actually know the time, but yes, it can be very quick. It can take a long time. It just really depends.
I think time for a lot of us is sort of a kryptonite. It's time is at a premium, our attention span is at a premium. And that was really where I was going with that question. It's fascinating to me to watch how long it takes to craft
some of these things. It takes a long time. Cutting images out can take a long time. Like if you see this little painting, this is print, but these people are actually tiny. To cut that all out and stuff, it takes a long time, but I actually enjoy that process. Like I love sitting there and just cutting the images.
And Kenneth, there's such a tangibility to everything that you do. You work in so many different disciplines, but tangibility seems to be like a really underlying theme of everything that you're doing. And obviously by the wall behind you, I think that's a pretty accurate statement. Would you agree with that? And why is the physicality of making these things so important to you?
Well, some might say that it's just because I'm old and that's my generation and I'm stuck in there. I don't think so, but it is that tangibility. And in a way, I look at whether I'm printing or making a book or I'm making the things I have back here, everything is sort of like sculpture to me. And even if it's a flat sheet that is being designed, a poster, well, I'm thinking about the material it's being printed on. And for me, that's like a sculpture. You're concerned about what the physicality of it, and it changes how people respond to it. And in a design sense, I'm really fascinated by the idea that the tangibility, the physical makeup of this design object, of this book, it can reflect the content of what the words are saying and what the images are saying. And so I like to play with that when I do artist books, very limited edition things. And I've tried to bring that into my printed design work to say, well, how can I make this a sculptural object? How can I manipulate the form to, again, reinforce or produce an additional meaning?
So this is a question for everyone. Stuart, with photography, it's relatively straightforward, taking that content and putting it into book form. But for the rest of you that are doing physical objects, what is the process that you use to digitize what you're doing to put into the books and the print materials that you're doing? So Maya, we can start with you.
Well, I use a scanner. I scan all my work, and then I use Photoshop to edit if I need anything to get the color right, and then I print it. I get all my prints professionally printed because I don't think, personally for me, I can get the quality that I would love my customers to have. So all my prints are professionally printed then from then on. But I do scanning and stuff all the time.
I love that. I love scanners. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I've always loved them. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I would say like 90% of my work is done digitally on the iPad. And then it's much faster to make like client revisions and just to have everything in layers and stuff. but it's usually printed on products. So it's on like packaging, puzzles, like prints, all the stuff behind me. You can kind of see like tech accessories, cell phone cases, like you name it. And I license my art, which is, if you're not familiar, you're technically renting your art to a company and they will print and manufacture it. So I don't actually have to hold any inventory. They just pay me to use the rights to my art. So it makes it a lot easier.
Fantastic. Kenneth, how about you? How do you get your big paintings and things together?
I love those scanners too. And I like a lot of found material or repurposed things. And my personal aesthetic is not about a lot of precision. And so that your phone camera has improved so much, it's like, great, now I don't have to invest in an actual camera. Now, for all those people who might want me to do design for them, if something has to be very detailed and precise, yes, I know how to generate that. But a lot of the imagery I generate is the phone will do the job, a scanner will.
And I'm curious because Maya and Kenneth, your pieces are pretty sizable. What kind of scanner do you have that would actually fit, or do you have to composite pieces of scans and then composite things together? Because from the website, it looked like some of your pieces are pretty sizable. So I'm like, I would love to have an enormous scanner, but I don't have one.
My pieces are, because the vintage images are quite small, generally pieces are quite small, so they fit my A3 scanner really easily. The paintings I do, or the mixed media paintings I do have to take a picture of them with a camera, or I will get them professionally scanned at the art places where they have like massive scanners. But generally, I just use my normal scanner because I'm quite lucky that my work is quite small. And it goes to 1,200 DPI, so it goes high quality, and it can print pretty much as big as you can get, really.
All right, I'm jealous. I definitely want that. So, Stuart, one of the things I find really interesting today is that the playing field for people who shoot editorial work, meaning magazine style work. So you're shooting for Nat Geo, you're shooting for Washington Post, newspapers. Historically, as photographers coming up, I studied photojournalism. Getting printed in the print edition of those publications was like the holy grail. It's what everybody wanted. Now, obviously, there's Nat Geo Online, there's the Nat Geo television channel, and Washington Post Online. What role does the print version of those publications play for you today compared to 15 years ago or 10 years ago, or even when you just started out?
Well, I think that the print version, especially with Nat Geo magazine, or the book as they call it, it's very curated and intentional. I've never had more back and forth with color correction and color fidelity and tonal range than I have working with them. And it was such a wonderful, refreshing thing when I had the opportunity to have some work in print there for the first time a few years ago. Is I'm not just sending them a JPEG and it's just getting printed on, on newspaper, on like, the equivalent of like, just like painter paper. This is like, no, we want to make sure the color's right. You need to send us a TIFF in this format. And there was just a lot of nice back and forth. And so even though it was still sort of digital and intangible for me in that part of the process, getting the magazine in the mail or going to like a newsstand and seeing it in print was just super cool. And it's like, part of the record at that point. It's, they only do 12 issues a year of the regular magazine. And so, you can publish 100 news stories a day. And again, there's an importance of currency of the news, having your sort of day-to-day there, but being able to go slower and have a curated set of images. I mean, it's a traditional photographic essay when you do a story for the magazine. And, it's like somebody was talking about in the audience now with like framing a print, all the choices you have to make. I mean, it's the same thing with sequencing and editing in print. And so it really forces you to slow down. You spend more time looking over your takes. You spend more time toning the images, and you spend more time talking about how they all fit together into a cohesive story.
Does that creep into your mindset when you're in the field? Let's say you're coming up to a situation where you look at, and you, as a photographer, you have a pretty good idea on a scale of 1 to 10, the sort of drama that you're looking at. You get into that scene and you go, oh my man, this is like a 5-star thing. I need to be on. Does the fact that possibility of living in print in the magazine, does that creep into your mind at any point, saying like, I have to make sure that I'm 100% on because this is going to be good enough to potentially land in that spot? Because for the audience, historically, as a photographer, especially anyone who came up in the journalism world or in the photojournalism or documentary world, the pinnacle prize was getting published in Nat Geo. To be in what we always refer to as the yellow magazine was a huge deal. And I'm just curious because I had never worked for Nat Geo, but I assisted for people who were shooting for Nat Geo. And when I would assist for them, when they worked for Time Magazine and Newsweek and Life and everything else. But when I was assisting for Nat Geo, there was a heightened level of performance. And I'm just curious if that's ever like creeped into your mind. Uh-oh, he might be frozen. He's either frozen or he's incredibly calm. I'm going with frozen. So we'll come back to that question. Jess, you mentioned something a minute ago. How life-changing was the iPad for you?
Yeah, actually, I had put it off for a long time. My sister gave me her old iPad as a gift, and she was like, "I think you'd really like it. Like, try it out." And I was like, I was just used to like sketching by hand, and I still do this where I'll sketch in my sketchbook first just to get the like rough idea in my head, just do a thumbnail. And then I'll like bring it into the iPad and start like fleshing it out. It's just, I don't know, like by hand, for me, it's just much, much easier and more receptive. But as I grew along with the iPad, it became much easier to use. I'm like, oh, there's, quick undo, and there's, like layers and stuff, so I can do color options much faster. But yeah, I still use them hand in hand.
So percentage-wise, is it 100% of your work starts in the physical paper book, and then that transfers over to the iPad, or are there certain things that you just say, look, I need to skip past the physical side because this is so complex, I'm going to need that redo button?
Yeah, it's maybe like probably like 60 digital, 40% like physical. And I also I started my sketchbook recently, and I just love that like tangible process, especially like with the rise of AI and all this like auto-generated art. I feel like this calling to go back to traditional mediums and just kind of make art by hand, because it's so much more intentional. You don't have that quick like undo. It's like every mark counts. So yeah, especially now.
Yeah, that's a little intimidating when you're, staring at a blank canvas, making that first pen mark can be a little scary. Stuart, you're back.
Sure. I apologize. I'm not sure what happened with cutting out, but your question about needing to be on or focused and thinking, are you thinking differently visually and creatively when you're on assignment, say for Nat Geo at a wildfire? And the answer is yes and no. On one side of the token, you're there to tell the story in the most honest, best way possible in the context of what you're trying to say. On the other hand, are you thinking about the broader implications of what you're trying to say? Are you trying to make an image that's something that fits into the daily news cycle? Are you feeding the beast? Or are you trying to step back a little bit and spend a little more time thinking and take an image that's maybe a little bit slower or layered and intentional that tells the story in the broader way? And I know that's sort of an intangible thing to describe in words, but I mean, the magazine will do a double truck that's almost a panoramic aspect ratio, and they'll want space for text, which is different than shooting 9:16 video if you're Instagramming live of a fire happening. So yeah, there definitely are some different considerations when working out there.
I was assisting for Nat Geo once, and the photographer looked at me and said, "Oh, this is way bigger than I thought. You're going to have to shoot too." And my heart just stopped for a couple of minutes. And the entire history of the magazine and the National Geographic Society and my entire life, like all pinpointed at that 1 second. I think I almost passed out. But so Kenneth, you work in design, art, writing, music, culture. How on earth do you balance all of that? And is there a core theme that connects all of those things for you that allows you to stay on track in continuing to produce as well as teach?
I do it by not trying to plan it at all. I really work intuitively, and probably that's bad news for having an organized career, but it's gone that way. When I want to write things, I write things. And if I don't feel like making things, I don't, and then it works the other way. So that means I have a lot of projects that are in various stages of completion until I just, come to it. And I suppose the through line through it all is just being that, of being spontaneous, and then coming back to it and working out the details, particularly with writing, where it's very spontaneous at first, and then I'll clamp down and do the work and do the editing. Now, if somebody invites me to write something, well, that changes the perspective. That improves my mood and makes me want to write. But otherwise, I just go where my interest takes me, and it seems to have worked out.
Yeah, I'd say you're doing okay. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just saw a little thing that was muting. So this is a question for everybody, which, Kenneth, you said something that made me think about this. And I think this is a really important question, especially for anyone in the audience who's at what I would say consumer level, prosumer level, is what percentage of the work that you do is commission versus self-generated work? And the secondary question of that is, how important is self-generated work overall in leading you to where you're going to be as a creative somewhere down the line? So Maya, what about you? What percentage is commission versus personal work?
Commission, I would say probably 10%. 90% is my own initiative and my own work, which makes it easier because I can create from my own imagination, just use my own initiative and create whatever I feel and want to create. But I think I have worked with brands and clients before. I tend to use more digital art when I create digitally because of the editing aspect. But a lot of my clients have actually wanted me to create handmade. So I'll have to not glue it down, create it, and then take a picture, send it, and then see if they like it, and then edit that. So yes, most of my work is self-initiative, and I'll create everything.
And
that's how I feel.
My secondary question to you, Maya, is would you say that the percentages lean higher for clients being influenced by your personal work and then commission you to do something based on that? That's the direction. Okay.
Most of the clients know my work. They will have seen it, and they just generally give me, like I have worked with a sunglasses brand recently, and they know my work. They just say they want their new collection to be in my collage, and that's all. And I'm free to do whatever I want. So yeah, most of them, my clients just trust me, I guess.
And Jess, what about you? What percentage commission versus personal, and why is doing personal work so important?
Yeah, I would say about 60% is client commissions. And then a lot of times they reach out and they'll just say like, oh, I like this lettering style. Just like say this phrase, in your style. So they seek me out for my style and my colors. And then a lot of times I just make art for fun, and then it gets licensed later on. Maybe that's like a year or 2 years down the road, but I'll have companies approach me and they're like, I really like this drawing that you made a year ago. Can we license it on a notebook? And I'm like, sure. So I'm always creating work for my art licensing library because I know I can sell it later on down the road.
That's very interesting. And that's something that's come up multiple times on this call, is that when you guys are free, left to your own devices, and you're creating on your own without any outside influence, that work is being repurposed by clients who are probably just looking to be led in a certain direction, and they recognize the value in your work and allow you to lead them where they want to go. Stuart, with you, what is it? Fires are such a specific thing, but what's the percentage of commission versus assignment, and how is that different than what it was when you first walked up to your first fire?
It's funny with fires. Usually I'm starting to get ready to go something and on my way driving to one, and I'll get a phone call getting put on assignment because usually if I'm running out to cover it, it usually ends up being a big enough deal where there's some sort of regional or national interest in it. So it can, usually it's 75%. I'm just going off on my own, but probably 50 to 75% of the time, by the time I get there, I'm on assignment for someone. But what Jess said about the licensing, like for me, it's really important. There's a big long tail licensing because the work that I do is not necessarily super common out there. So I'm photographing images that have use for anything from companies that are advertising for wildfire water pumps and fire helmets to, nonprofits that are working on conservation and things like that. So curation of my library and the long tail of that is also really important, sort of help fund and underwrite, ongoing work that I want to do on my own.
Okay. And Kenneth, what about you? What's the percentage?
Well, being an academic, there isn't really much structure for commission. My doing that writing is very odd. Overall, out of all the things I do, I think it probably like 5% to 10%. And most of that would be taken up of doing graphic design work where I am doing something for someone else. That produces that even, getting to that number. Writing, it would be very, infrequently that I'd be asked. And of course, the artwork and the other things, that's entirely me doing that.
Okay, so you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but about 20 years into my photography career, I said to myself, I don't really want to be on assignment. I don't want commissions. I just want to do my own work and then license that work after the fact, because there were no parameters, there were no restrictions, there was no timeline, deadline. I didn't have to keep an editorial style in mind. I could just create what I want. Not that I want to alienate you from any of your clients, but have you ever felt that way? Like, man, I wish that people would just leave me alone so I could make my own work? Or is the commission side fueling you in a way that the personal side isn't? Maya, what about you?
Well, I create most of my work at my own initiative, so that makes it easy for me.
Yeah.
But when I do love working on commissions, just because it challenges me, it takes me out of my comfort zone, and because it's usually working on something that's really not something. It doesn't include like elements that I have worked on before. So no, I love both, and definitely hope that in the future I have a bit more brand work. But at the same time, I do enjoy my freedom. So it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah.
I do love both. And I think as long as it's balanced, I think I'm happy. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Jess, what about you?
Yeah, I license my artwork, and so I noticed there has been a big decline in my client commissions, especially like this year, but I'm making about like triple what I made last year through art licensing.
Wow.
And so it's funny. Yeah, I've learned kind of like the power of royalties. And so I'll make like a percentage, but over time, through sales, that really adds up, and that actually ends up being much better than just a flat rate commission fee.
That is such a great point, and I'm actually really happy to hear you say that licensing, because in photography, licensing has seen ups and downs over the past decade or so. Stock has a very different marketplace than it was 10 or 15 years ago, and so it's encouraging to hear that. But I love that concept because it's not just that single commission, you're getting licensing fees from a variety of different people. That's smart. Stuart, what about you?
I mean, the licensing, like it's hit or miss. Sometimes, like, there was a last minute thing where a large company wanted to use a picture I took in a Super Bowl ad, and that was, significantly more than days of assignment on editorial, and that was like 2 hours of negotiating and obtaining a model release from somebody I was able to track down in the image, and it ended up being like a really nice thing. So it's important, like, and there's a lot of, it's like anything else. It's negotiating, it's knowing the legality, the lingo, being able to go back and forth and be an advocate and know the value of your own work. And I'm sure Jess has the time that she spends creating her work, that's reflected in her rates of negotiations, and also knowing the value of the work that you're putting out there. I think it's awesome if you're getting a percentage of sales, because in photography, that's not the case. And I guarantee you, if I tried to negotiate that in some of my work, maybe it would end up getting licensed for more. I think that's a great idea. And it all goes back to, being an advocate for yourself. And when I say that, professionally show and making sure that you value your work. And for everyone in the audience, even if you're just a prosumer or enthusiast, it's like never sell yourself short with your work.
So Jess, go ahead.
Add real quick too that I love art licensing because I can sell it in multiple categories. So one category might be greeting cards, another might be puzzles, or a pattern on fabric. So I can kind of get a lot of money just from one piece of artwork. I'm leveraging it in all different categories, and it's also not like sold outright, like a full buyout. It's usually like a 3-year term or something that I'm making this money on it.
Mhm.
That is fantastic. I'm jealous of that. I think that's great. And that was one of the questions I had for you, Jess, was that your work is print. It's in you're creating it digitally, but it's used in so many different print forms. It's pretty remarkable. Greeting cards, tech, home goods, packaging, book covers. That to me is so exciting on how a single piece can travel through all those mediums.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to focus a little bit more specific on print at this point. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I've got some questions from the audience that I want to make sure to get to. But Kenneth, you've done all of you are using print in a myriad of ways. I'm curious, number one, Kenneth, we're going to start with you, but do you guys still use print portfolios to show off your work, number one? And Kenneth, you've done some very atypical things with your books. Your art books are collected, number one, which is a whole separate industry that we could talk about forever. But I think that's interesting to talk about how that happens. And you wrote a novel, but you published the novel in a 4-volume limited edition magazine, which for a lot of people, their heads are just going to go, like, you write a novel, you want to put it in front of as many people as possible, but not you. You decide to do a limited edition, and it's 4 volumes of magazine. So number one, do you use a printed portfolio to show your work? And two, why did you do these other things with print?
Well, my work, you're going to see it on that Tumblr page or via Instagram in pieces. And so there's not really a context where I need to have a printed portfolio. And what was the second part?
The second part was you've done atypical publishing projects. So for your novel, for instance, instead of just producing a mass-produced book that you put in front of as many strangers as possible, you went limited edition in 4-volume magazine, which for a lot of people would just seem like, why would you do that?
Well, for me, I was trying to make the logical extension of what was happening in literature, where a lot of writers were writing simulacra. For me, the best example of that is Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire, which takes the form of a long poem, but it's supposedly written by this writer. And so I said, well, what's the extension of this, where somebody might come upon this thing and think it's one thing, but it's actually another. And for me, it was to make this a magazine and also to mess with people's expectation of, well, a novel has to take this form and it has to follow this sort of structure. No, let's go to the ultimate of it being this, representation and being completely subsumed in, again, that people can come to it. And in one hand, they think of it as design and they look at it a certain way. And then if they come to it and think of it as literature, well, they'll come with a different expectation. And rather than fulfilling categories, I prefer to play with them.
That's interesting. I love the concept of keeping them guessing. I think that is, again, in today's era where we're battling for attention span, when you do things that are atypical, even things that make people puzzled or question what they're seeing, it's actually good because you're slowing them down enough that you might actually be getting undivided attention. Jess, do you use a printed portfolio at all?
I do, particularly with my surface pattern design collection. It's pretty simple to email someone and attach a PDF or just say like, hey, here's a link to, my website. But when you're at like a trade show, for example, and you're making a personal connection with someone, I think it's super important to give them like a printed portfolio, just like a magazine style with like all your print design in it, just to show them like your work, it's tangible, it's a professional, and it makes such a strong impression.
And that was not a planted question for the foundation of this whole call. I'm so glad to hear that. Maya, how about you?
I print a portfolio when I do art shows or exhibitions, just because when you do an art show, I can't obviously show all of my works, and I have different art series. So I love to have a portfolio where people can just have a look and go through and see loads of different artworks that I have actually created, not just the ones that are on display. So it's really, really essential. It's also really good. I use it when I go for meetings with the galleries and stuff, because it makes it a bit more professional rather than me showing them on the phone. And obviously I can't carry all of my artworks with me. So definitely an essential for me.
Love hearing that. Definitely. I think there's a resonance difference between, and it's not to say that an iPad portfolio is a bad thing at all. It's a complement to everything else, but I love hearing that about print. So Stuart, years ago, I'm working on a project And right before I left the house, I was like, I'm going to take just a little book that I had made from the project, slipped it into my bag, and I'm out shooting, and it was around an airport. And so I was like, at some point, the police are coming because I'm with a camera around an airport. And so sure enough, this cop flies up with the lights and siren on, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm trying to explain this art photo project, and he wants nothing to do with this. But I was like, oh, here. And I pulled out this little field guide from the work that I had printed with Blurb and gave it to him. And he just completely transformed. And he said, this is yours? You did this? This is like a real thing. And it changed. So I'm curious with what you're doing, because there's got to be issues with access, and you're around authorities all the time. Do you ever implement that same thing, or do you use a printed portfolio?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because I think in kind of thinking about things to share on this panel, is it made me realize that I really ought to make some trade books, do like 20 of them and keep them in the back of my pickup truck and carry a few in my Nomex or Fire Pack, because when you're out in the boonies, the phones will shut down due to heat half the time because it's so hot at these fires, or you can't see it during the day, or there's no cell reception to show law enforcement at a checkpoint what you're up to, because anybody can make a business card and say they're media now, and there's a whole other can of worms there. But point being, if you've got a professional example of your work that's tangible that you can show people, it really helps with access. So in years past, I've just kept like an 8x10 copy on my previous photo book to show people, to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm legit, like I'm a real person. And to what you're saying, whether it's authority figures or somebody you're trying to earn the trust of, like it's a critical thing. So I think I could do a little more on that, having something physical, because you can't depend on electronic devices all the time to function well when you're out in the middle of nowhere.
So yes, you just got a homework assignment. We're all going to be waiting for that by the end of the week. So there's so many questions I have for you that we're never going to be able to get to. And I want to basically ask this question before we get to some of the questions from the audience, which is, what would you like to see in the future with print? What do you not have that you would love to have? And Jess, we can start with you.
Oh man, no pressure. Wow, I'm really impressed with what's going on in print, especially like how you can self-publish nowadays. I was looking into self-publishing my first book. Like I'm starting a workbook on how to hand letter. And so I think it's really amazing, like especially with Blurb and all the different options that you have, how you can totally self-publish a book. You don't have to go through a publisher anymore. And I think that's really amazing. So that's definitely on the horizon for me.
Maya, how about you? Is there anything you'd love to see in the print world?
To be honest, I'm here with Jess, the same, that I think the print world has been amazing, and there's so much out there that you could do as an artist, that just the possibilities are endless. I do definitely want to publish a book. I would love to publish a book of how to make collages and and just teach people in more physical form how to do that. But I think the print world is amazing already. So I don't know. I couldn't imagine anything more that we could do, but who knows? Maybe I'll be surprised.
I've got something that I'll share that I want. Blurb will be sick of hearing me say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But Kenneth, how about you?
I've always sort of like designed or made things to what technology exists, so that there
Smart.
is right away the ability to self-publish is just like a dream of the younger me. And I suppose if there was something, it would be in to have books where I could very easily have both text and image, where I like the books that are all text. I like the paper for that. However, if I want images, I'm not a fan of glossy paper. Sorry. I like more matte
I'm not either.
things. And so it's sort of like that. If there was something like right in between, sort of like the trade book and the photo book, oh, that would be perfect.
Excellent. Stuart, how about you?
It's so and this is a random plug, but like I've done, my first Blurb book I did back in 2009 when I was an undergrad minoring in photography. So there's been a lot of really great options on the book front. But I think what Kenneth was saying, what you touched upon, Dan, is is there a happy medium between like that kind of like rough hewn print paper and this uber glossy stuff that just kind of feels weird, and maybe like a satin or a matte finish in between, just this really beautiful, like, nice premium mill paper that we can kind of have in the middle that can kind of, so if you're doing the text and photo layout, you have something that's a balance.
Excellent. So my design, I have a list of demands that are a mile long, which may or may not ever be met. But I would imagine this: imagine getting 100 copies of a book that has customizations like a linen cover, foil stamping, printed digitally, but at offset prices. So you get the lower cost per unit. You basically, what in essence you're getting is a custom, affordable 100-book run, because I'm assuming that for most of you, you have a top client list, whether it's collectors or galleries or curators or brands or whoever, that those could be used strategically to send out to those clients. Maybe once a year, you do a 100-book run, 50 go to your best clients, and then some of them you keep for yourself and others you use for whatever marketing and education purposes. So that's my selfish thing here. So we've got a couple of questions here from the audience, and Maya, there's a question for you. And that is, do you ever add elements into a book after, such as posting an item into a printed book? And if yes, would you tape it in?
No, I have done this before. No, I would just glue it straight to the book. Most of the books that I have done collages in would be vintage. So they will be really old and lovely books, but I would be using glue to stick other images to them.
And a second question for Maya, which is actually kind of intriguing here. I'm curious about this. What is the smallest collage you've scanned and produced?
The smallest is 7 centimeters by 7. So it's very, very tiny.
And how long did that one take to produce?
That one didn't take a very long time. Finding the tiny images has taken the longest to find them, because obviously you can imagine how small they have to be. But yes, those are quite difficult to print because obviously they are so small. So if you want to make them larger, you have to be careful of how large you can go with those. But I love working on small, different scales because it challenges my work.
Yeah, 7 by 7 centimeters is it's a mini collage.
Mini collage, yes.
So there's also a couple of technical questions, which I think I will answer just very briefly. One is, what's the best paper for a black and white trade book? Paper is a subjective material, so it's hard for me to tell you exactly what to use because your preference might be different from mine. I print documentary projects on a glossy paper, and I print portrait projects on an uncoated, the Proline papers. So I use one, the coated for documentary, and one for the uncoated for my portraiture. With trade books, it's interesting because the highest quality paper in trade books is called standard color, which you can print black and white on that as well, but it's the highest quality paper in the trade books. However, and this is where making test books is absolutely essential for everyone, not only the panelists here, but for everyone who works in print. You have to work through revision and make test books. The economy papers in black and white are actually, in the trade books, are intriguing papers. There's two versions. There's a neutral black and white, and then there's a cream-based, 60-pound cream-based paper. And that's actually one of my all-time favorite blurb papers. It was never really intended for photography, but if you prepare your files the right way, it looks almost, it's a very lo-fi newsprint style look that doesn't look like anything else in the blurb lineup. Is that technically a good paper for your work? I can't say, but it's worth investigating. And the great thing about trade book and trade book paper is it is incredibly affordable. So the test books that you're going to make are not going to cost you. You'll probably pay more for shipping than you will for the book itself. So it's definitely worth working on. And I could go further mixing and matching materials, but I think those are good. And the last question is best color paper for wedding books. My advice would be to use the Proline papers, which are the highest level, and they're archival papers. And when you're making someone a wedding book, you want that thing to last. You don't want any issues with the paper. And the cool thing about Proline is you've got two very distinctive papers, an uncoated and a coated paper. They look very different. One is not better than the other. They're just different. So I would stick with the Proline. And the last question we have here is, and then I have a question for the rest, for the group that we can leave with, because it's a super hot topic right now. But the last question is, what other products in addition to prints could work together to expand business? And I guess this I can address this to the rest of you. We've got 5 minutes left. So what other products in addition to prints could work together to expand business? And that could be books, it could be magazines. So Jess, how about you?
I mean, greeting cards, that makes up a huge bulk of my work. I sell prints on Etsy, but then I also make greeting card versions of it.
Excellent. Stuart, anything for you? Anything else?
Oh gosh, it's that's a tough one. I mean, there's just, I think more than anything, I'm coming away inspired to kind of try a couple new projects now that have been floating in the back of my mind, you know, and it's so great to be here with, you know, collage artists and design artists and writers. It's just, you know, it's, yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm at.
And then Kenneth, you as well, any other things outside of prints that you use in the print world to help promote your business?
What I'd say immediately that came to mind is much more oversized books, the ability to increase the scale in both directions. I understand the economics of it, and I would just hope the economics would allow for much bigger books and much smaller ones.
Okay. And Maya, we've talked about prints and books and greeting cards. Is there any other print product that you could think of that might help you expand business?
Yes, I sell yearly calendars. So I print calendars, and those are extremely popular for me as it comes to end of the year and stuff. So that's definitely something that I would use to expand.
Okay, so last question for everyone. There's actually 2 questions. I lied, not one. Number 1 is, do you collaborate with other artists, either in your genre or outside? And 2, what do you think about AI and the impact it's having right now? And remember, we've got 3 minutes left. So Kenneth, we're starting with you. Do you collaborate with other artists?
Yes, as often as I can and always have. And AI, I'm very interested. I'm not afraid of it, particularly as an educator. So I'm still trying out its capabilities.
Excellent. Stuart, how about you? Do you collaborate with other folks?
I do. Sometimes it fires, sometimes with digital work, and it's a lot of fun because you're able to sort of have these creative synergies you wouldn't necessarily have by yourself. AI, double-edged sword. I think there's some wonderful possibilities with it. I think it can be used for nefarious purposes like any other technology. It's just another tool in the toolbox that we have to bring our visions or whatever we're working on to life. And what people make of that is up to them.
And Maya, how about you? Do you collaborate with other creatives?
Yes, definitely. And I love working with other artists whenever I can. It always inspires me to work with them. And yes, definitely. As far as the AI comes, it's not, as I create everything handmade and stuff, I focus on that. But who knows, maybe in a few years' time, I will be all digital, and you never know. So yeah, just something to keep my eyes on, I guess.
And Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely collaborate with other artists, particularly in like webinars. I just hosted like my first live like draw along this week with another artist. So that's always fun when we can share our processes. And yeah, as far as AI goes, you know, I think it's something that is just going to grow and grow. It's kind of like the elephant in the room that you can't ignore. I actually use it to streamline my business. So I will draft out an email for like my newsletter, and then I'll just say, you know, I'll throw it into ChatGPT and just say like, hey, can you make this sound more confident? And I'll see what they say. And, you know, I'll take little bits of what they say and incorporate it into my own voice. But I use it to work smarter and not harder. So I use it to streamline my business.
Interesting. That's smart. I don't know enough about AI to really comment on that, but I can say one thing about collaboration, which was it took me far too long. I was sort of myopically focused as a photographer on my own life and career. I didn't collaborate until much too late. But everything good I've done since 2012 has been collaborations with other people, designers, writers, other creatives who are they're actually just better than me. And it's the print projects that I've made from those collaborations are so much better than anything else I've ever done. So highly recommend to everyone to collaborate, and also really happy to hear everyone on this panel talk about how immediately you said, yes, we all collaborate with others. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone in attendance who came to this, and also thank you to the panelists for being here. It's a blast talking to all of you. You are so talented, and everybody's work here is so different from one another, but we're all part of the same greater creative community. And it's nice to see a thriving community into post-COVID world. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.